and welcome to GameSack. That's right, we're talking about the Sega Saturn this time.
Good times ahead. Well, as a Nintendo fanboy, I really don't know a lot about the Saturn, so maybe Joe here can fill me in, and you people out there that don't know a lot either.
Okay, let's take a quick look at the system. The Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn launched in Japan of November of 1994 and everywhere else in 1995. The US launch surprised the hell out of everyone, but you can bet I picked mine up right away and loved it. The system had a whole bunch of processors, making it pretty tough to program for. While most people considered it inferior at 3D, it was in fact a 2D monster. The console also had a cartridge slot which could be used to increase the amount of backup RAM for saving your games. In fact, most games could save directly to the cartridge. There were also carts that increased the memory of the system, but we'll talk more about those later. In the back of the system behind a panel, you could access the internal battery and also add an MPEG video card. These cards were only available in Japan and allowed certain games to display MPEG-1 quality full motion video. The Saturn had, in my opinion, the best controller ever, and they later released a cool analog controller as well. All in all, the Sega Saturn sold around 9.5 million units total with nearly 600 released games.
Joe, that was some really informative information on the Saturn there, but, I don't know.
What?
It's all right, I guess.
What do you mean it's all right? It's awesome,
well,
man.
Compared to the Ultra 64, I don't know.
Ultra 64, I can't believe you're still calling it that.
Well, I like that name.
Okay, anyway. We've got some games to show you, and you picked the first one.
I did. A launch title, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, so let's take a look.
Clockwork Knight was a release title for the Saturn in 1995. Back then, it was refreshing to see a new platformer showing off the prowess of a new system. Back in 1995, this game looked fantastic. To me, it was like Donkey Kong Country taken to the next level in terms of graphics, as all the game sprites looked great. Everything's very colorful and the levels had the perfect atmosphere. The gameplay's good, although Pepper Chew, or whatever the hell that knight's name is, kinda controls sluggish. He can move quickly and attack enemies just fine, but something isn't connecting in terms of control. It's nothing major, mind you, and the game is still very playable. There are no checkpoints in the levels, and if you run out of lives completely, you've got to start from the beginning of the world and not the stage you were working on. The music in this game is, well, it's not good. Seriously, just turn down the volume to minimize the aural pain. Playing this game again for this review, I felt that while it's still very playable, it just doesn't have the same appeal to me as it did in 1995. Clockwork Knight 2 came out in the same damn year. Talk about a fast turnaround. I guess it shouldn't be surprising, as all the controls are exactly the same with nothing new added in this department. There are new levels to play through, of course. Some of them even have forced scrolling. Graphically, it's similar to the first, and there are some nice effects here and there. Again, the music is really bad, and it even shares some of the same tunes with the first game. The only thing they really added to this one is a boss rush mode. You can fight all the bosses in a row if that makes you feel tough.
Psychic Killer Tarom is a side-scrolling action game by Time Warner. It was released only in Japan and is one of the more hard-to-find titles. And if you do find it, be prepared to pay out the ass for it. Anyway, the game mostly uses polygons for its backgrounds and sprites for everything else. It takes place in ancient mythical Japan and everything is really creepy. You have a little thing as your targeting system. Get close enough to an enemy and it'll lock on while you mash away at the fire button or hold down for a more powerful attack. You can change nearby targets with the L or R buttons. This game throws a ton of enemies and attacks at you, but you can deflect many of them with a shield, which you get by pressing the Y button. Even so, you're still probably going to get hit a lot. Once your life runs out, you turn into a log, because of course you know that makes sense. If you choose to play as the other guy, you turn into what I guess is a brown tomato on a stone when you die. The gameplay here isn't awful, but really, it could have been much better. Sometimes it's kind of frustrating, but they give you a ton of continues, so if you're willing to use them, you'll probably beat the game. What I do like is that the game goes almost completely uninterrupted from the beginning all the way to the end boss. The only time the screen breaks away even for a second is when you get swallowed by this giant frog. You find yourself inside his stomach and you're still battling him. Oh look, even his tapeworms want to take you down. The graphics are all pretty good. I think they could have been a little better if they stuck with 2D instead of polygons, but for the most part everything works to give you a really creepy vibe. The music is appropriate with a lot of Japanese sounding stuff, but here and there it gets kind of good. So is this game worth the price? Definitely not. However, if you can get it for $50 or less, don't pass it up. But that's just not going to happen.
Pebble Beach Golf Links is, in my opinion, one of the most fun golf games I've ever played. You laugh, but I'm serious. This game introduced one of the coolest features to a golf game that I just love, and I'll get to that in a second. The game stars the ever-exciting Craig Stadler.
I'm Craig Stadler. It's a great day for golf, and there's no place like Pebble Beach.
And you play on the only course available in the game, Pebble Beach. Playing the tournament mode, you're treated to a flyover of each hole and a description of the hole and how it should be played by the very famous Craig Stadler.
Get the ball over the gorge in your second, relatively easy birdie.
You tell him, Craig. You choose from 1 to 4 players and a caddy, and it's off you go. The digitized characters look pretty goofy these days, but back when this game was new, they looked amazing. Setting up and hitting your shot is very simple, and you'll get the hang of it right away. Now, to the feature that I love the most and even to this day still enjoy. It's the ball cam. After hitting your shot, the camera follows the ball through the air, and as stupid as it seems, I can watch it endlessly. For you people that don't care for such things, you can turn this off in the options menu. As you play and make great shots, Craig will come on and tell you how he feels.
Great shot, right down the middle.
He will even taunt you at times.
Think you can get it inside mine?
Well, at least I thought he was taunting me, but now I feel that he might be prepositioning me for something I'm not quite willing to do.
Think you can get it inside mine?
Please don't ask me that anymore, Mr. Stadler. Anyways, graphically, the game is what you would expect from a 1995 golf simulation. It's still very playable, mind you, but it's just not nice to look at anymore. The music is great. I like the soft jazz soundtrack and it really fits the game. If you want a golf game for the Saturn, you can't do any better than this one.
I'm not too comfortable with this.
One thing that was cool about the Saturn was its ability to use cartridges and CDs. A couple of games came on both cart and CD and both were required to run the game. An example of this is the King of Fighters 95. It's a port of the Neo Geo game where you can pick teams of 3 fighters. The cartridge contains all of the background graphics, but the sprites and music are all loaded off of the CD. This helps to reduce loading time a bit and also helps to keep the level of animation pretty high. Obviously, if you want to play this game, you're going to need either a Japanese Saturn or a region-modified console, as your cartridge-based region bypasses won't work. This game was pretty cool, but it needed to load every time you changed characters during a bout. Then there was the 1 MB RAM cartridge, which effectively allowed the Saturn to have 3 megs of RAM. Quite a few games used this, like the King of Fighters 96 and King of Fighters 97. Another game that required the 1 meg RAM cart was Metal Slug, which is a pretty darn good port from the Neo Geo. Unlike the wimpy PlayStation version, it can fit the entire level in without having to stop to load. Oh, look at that! It keeps going without pausing the action? Hell yeah! Many games could optionally take advantage of the RAM cart to increase animation or whatnot. For example, all versions of Marvel Superheroes will let you enable a 3 meg RAM mode if a cart is inserted. Here's the game without the extra memory. Notice the Hulk's animation. Now here's the game with the RAM cart. Notice that there's more frames of animation. And when Sega and Capcom got serious, they came out with the 4 MB RAM cart, which allowed the Saturn to have a whopping 6 MB of RAM. The first game to use this is one of my favorite fighting games, X-Men vs. Street Fighter. The game is, for all intents and purposes, arcade perfect. The character animation is awesome and the stages often have multiple scenes. There's next to no loading at all when you're playing this game. I do wish it had more stages though. Capcom then came out with Vampire Savior, aka Darkstalkers 3, which required the cart. This helped make the game the best version of Darkstalkers on any console in my opinion. Street Fighter 03, also known as Street Fighter Alpha 3, also used a 4 meg RAM cart. This is a great version of the game, and you know what? It might just be the best version. And of course, let's not forget Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. This is another great one, though I feel it takes too many elements from the X-Men game. The backgrounds are all almost identical, and I think they could have worked a bit harder on that aspect, but it's still an awesome game. You can also use the 4MB RAM cart to play games that use the 1MB cart, but be careful. Some games like King of Fighters 96 can get some glitchy graphics when using the 4MB cart. Games like this require that you use the 1MB cart. Here's a list of all the RAM cart compatible games. I hope you can read fast or know how to work that pause button and it's gone.
Saturn Bomberman is pretty much what you'd expect from a Bomberman game, and that's quality. I absolutely love this series, even though there's probably more of them than Mario games. But the thing is, you probably only need to maybe have 2 or 3 of them in your collection. That's because they all have almost identical gameplay, with the only major difference being the backgrounds of the levels. Saturn Bomberman stands out in this respect as it has one feature that really makes it different. I'll get to that in a minute. So, if you haven't played Bomberman, shame on you. It's a great game and you should feel really bad right now. Anyways, the object of Bomberman is to blow up your enemies and obstacles by strategically placing bombs to blow them up. As you blow up obstacles, they'll randomly release power-ups which make you stronger, such as bombs, speed, kick, extending the length of your explosion, and more. It's a really great idea, and that's why the series has gone on for decades. The single-player mode has a story, and you must traverse through levels destroying lighted pillars to open an exit, eventually ending in a boss fight. It's fun, but anybody who's played Bomberman knows multiplayer is where the real fun is. So, what makes this game different? It supports 10-player simultaneous battles! All you need are 2 multi-taps, 10 controllers, and of course, 9 friends. Having a room big enough for all these people helps also. This mode is extremely enjoyable. The game map is stretched to a wide mode, and all the characters are super small. It's really fun, and you should try this mode if you ever have the chance. One of the better games on the Saturn, if you ask me.
Aw man, I wish I had 9 friends I could play that with.
No, you don't. They'd just be mooching off you and asking you to borrow all your great games.
Probably
you don't
true.
want that. So, like, hey, can I borrow Radiant Silvergun? Because, I know you're talking about it.
Okay, yeah, let's take a look at Radiant Silvergun, and no, you cannot borrow it. Radiant Silvergun is one of those pricey games that get a lot of attention. Well, in my opinion, it definitely deserves the praise it gets. This is a vertical shooter by Treasure, and as you might have guessed, is pretty unique. For one, there are no weapons to collect or power-ups in the game at all. You have 7 different weapons, and any of them can be used at any time simply by pressing a different button on the controller. You'll find that they each have their uses. What's kinda cool is that in the Saturn mode, your weapons get stronger the more you use them. Besides that, the game just feels different than other vertical shooters. It may be a bit off-putting to some, but not to me. In fact, it's probably one of my favorite vertical shooters ever. As with most Treasure games, you fight a ton of bosses. Some of them don't really even look like anything other than a collection of random shapes. Others will even require you to hide to avoid getting shot. The game as a whole is a blast. If you're a score junkie, you can chain your attacks to get the highest score you can. It probably goes without saying that the graphics here are fantastic, definitely some of the best on the system. The music is also great, giving the game a very intense and futuristic feel. Unfortunately, they only released this one in Japan, which should come as no surprise since Bernie Stolar is an idiot and killed the system before this game even had a chance. But you can pick it up on the Xbox 360 if you don't want to break the bank.
Die Hard Arcade is a beat-em-up game that's loosely tied to the Die Hard movie series. It's known as Dynamite Deca in Japan and Europe. It's a fun beat-em-up with a few aspects that I kind of find annoying. I've said it before, and I say it again, the 32-bit era is not known for good-looking 3D games. This game looks pretty bad, and everything seems to be low-count polygons. I mean, look at the wheel on this car. Tell me that looks fine. I dare you. Secondly, the game is made up of tiny areas where you fight a small amount of enemies. After the enemies are dispatched, then the game loads a new area. There's no wandering around down paths or hallways, which kinda makes the game seem a bit unfulfilling. Between some of the levels, you will have a QuickTime event where you have to push a button. This helps add a bit to the game, but not really by much. The controls are pretty good, well, as good as they get for a 32-bit polygon game. Punching, kicking, and jumping are all well done. If you want to turn a different direction, there seems to be a small lag which can get you killed.
The game will turn around in the end.
Shut up, Craig Stadler, your input is not welcome here. Okay, after all that griping, I do admit that I had a good time playing this game. It would be nice to see what this game would play like today on a current system if newly developed by the same team. Also included is a game called Deep Scan, which seems way out of place on this disc. It's a strange pre-8-bit looking game where you try and blow up submarines. Nice diversion, but I don't get it.
Virtua Cop by Sega is a light gun game included with a bright orange stunner. I like playing light gun games every once in a while, so I really enjoyed this one. Basically, you just need to shoot down the bad guys and not shoot the civilians. You can choose between 3 stages and each of them is fairly long. It's a decent port of the arcade, but the graphics and textures are all pretty plain. The music is fairly good in spots, and overall this is a fun game to play when you're in the mood for a good light gun game. Virtua Cop 2 came out not long after. It's pretty much more of the same, but this time the graphics are much more varied with higher detailed textures. They definitely figured out more about the Saturn by the time they made this one. The game lets you choose your route midway into the stage, and that helps add a little replayability. The game also seems to move at a faster pace than the original, and the levels are definitely longer. Unfortunately though, the music isn't as good as the original. Still, if you like the first, you'll definitely like this one. Of course, you can play with the control pad or the light gun, and both games are 2-player simultaneous, and that's really fun if you've got 2 guns. The original House of the Dead came out towards the end of the Saturn's retail life. Time to blast some zombies. Apparently this game is perhaps a bit too ambitious for the Saturn. I mean, can the texture resolution possibly be any lower? Oh well, it's still House of the Dead, so that helps make it cool. And damn is this game hard. The game stops to load several times per level, and your arm and wrist will definitely be glad about that. Still, it's kind of fun to play if you're a House of the Dead fan.
Rogan, it's you! Nobody leave here alive!
Sophie!
I often hear and read on the internets that Guardian Heroes is one of the best games on the Saturn. It's a beat-em-up type game, and to make your experience more fulfilling, they've added RPG elements. Your character can level up certain attributes between stages with points earned during the stage. Also, at certain points of the game you can choose different paths and even moral choices, all of which will bring you to one of the multiple endings. Obviously, this makes for a huge replay value in the story mode. Another new addition to this style of beat-em-up is fighting planes. There are 3 different planes you can fight on in this game. It adds a bit to the strategy of fighting enemies and especially bosses. When an enemy is throwing magic your way, you can switch planes and move around the attack, which is key to surviving longer. Some people don't really care for this multi-plane fighting, but I found it to be interesting and not too difficult to learn. Versus mode is a crazy 6-person battle royale that's quite fun to play. It's completely hectic and your hands will be killing you from all the button mashing you'll be doing. There have been many times playing the story mode and even the versus mode where I've lost my character on screen because there's so much going on. And the Saturn does all this with very minimal slowdown. I'm actually impressed. The music in this game is really good. There's a lot of great tracks in here and some nice mix of synth and guitar that really gets my blood flowing. Graphically, the game suffers a tad. While the game is full of color, there are lots of really ugly graphics here. Character sprites have rough edges. There's lots of pixelated backgrounds that have been blown up and put into the foreground, which just looks wrong. As we all know, the Saturn can, in fact, do transparencies, but this game doesn't. A lot of bushes and other things have a mesh effect because the developers just couldn't be bothered to make this game look as good as it could have. But this is a minor complaint, as the game is super fun to play, and if you can find it, be sure to pick it up.
Sega made some great 3D fighters for the Saturn like Virtua Fighter. This one was packed in with the system on launch day. It was fun to play for its time, but it's pretty glitchy and looks kinda bad. Still though, it's the Virtua Fighter experience at home and the music's not half bad. But Sega must have felt embarrassed about this because eventually they sent all registered US Saturn owners a copy of Virtua Fighter Remix for free. This game played exactly the same, but now the polygons were much more stable and the game even had some texture mapping. It looked so much better as a result. But as good as this was, it was nothing compared to Virtua Fighter 2. Running at the highest resolution any console was even capable of at the time, this game really improved on the first in every single way possible. It looks great, the music's great, and the control and moves feel much better. The jumps are still a bit floaty though. Sega followed that up with Fighting Vipers. This game had some quirky characters battling it out inside of a caged ring. The fighters each have armor and it's represented by the green symbols in the upper corners of the screen. If you're good, you can smash the armor off and that'll make each attack to that area even more effective. It's a good game, just not quite as memorable as the Virtua Fighter series. Speaking of that, they had to milk Virtua Fighter once more with Virtua Fighter Kids. Nothing like a game where a bunch of children beat each other up. This game is basically a kiddie version of Part 2. The graphics are bright and colorful, but the characters' heads are so big that it makes me feel like I have absolutely no reach at all. It plays okay, but I really don't see any reason for it to exist. One game I rarely ever see anyone mention is Last Bronx. This is a weapons-based fighter and it's actually pretty cool. Like all the 3D fighting games we've talked about so far, it's based on the Virtua Fighter control layout. Now some of the characters kind of remind me of Soul Calibur, but other than that, it's a pretty good original fighting game. I recommend picking this one up because it seems like most people haven't played it. And of course, we've got to talk about Fighters Mega Mix. Sega took Virtua Fighter and Fighting Vipers and smashed them into a single game. Most stages from both series are represented. There's no ring outs here, you've got to fight to the end. You can pick from a bunch of different characters and unlock even more. Now some of the new and unlockable characters include Bark as well as Bean from the arcade game Sonic the Fighters. You can play as a couple of Virtua Fighter kids, a weird bear thing that doesn't even animate, or as Seba, a reject that was left on the cutting room floor of the original Virtua Fighter. Perhaps you want to play as Rent-A-Hero, a Genesis RPG woefully left in Japan. You can play as any of these and more, like the car from Daytona. Wait, what? That's right, you can play as the car from Daytona. How badass is that? It's hard as hell to control, but who cares? That is hilarious. Anyway, Fighters Mega Mix is awesome overall. It controls a lot quicker than the two games it's based on, and it clearly doesn't take itself very seriously. Let me tell you, this game is a must if you own a Saturn. Alright, and there are a ton of great Saturn games, way more than we could cover in a single episode, but you know what? We're going to try to get as many in there as possible, so let's take a really quick look at a bunch more great Saturn games. These are games from the US or import games even, so.
Yeah, and we're going to do it in what? A montage, Joe?
Yes, a montage.
I love montages. We haven't had one forever.
Yeah, so let's go.
Time extended. Terrific. Another time extended. Great, your time has been extended.
Where's the crystals?
And there you have it, the Sega Saturn. Of course, I kind of hope we were able to cover some of those games in a little bit more detail in future episodes, depending on the subject matter, but, you never know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, take a look for them. And I don't know about you, but I learned a lot about the Sega Saturn today thanks to Joe here.
Don't touch me.
The Sega fan.
Okay, yeah, and thanks for watching.
Sega Saturn, Sega Saturn.
I can't believe Joe forgot Solar Eclipse, one of the best exclusive games for the system. Oh, what a dork.
Returning fire.
The real battle starts right now.
Craig Stadler, what the hell are you doing in here? Don't you have your own game? Get out of here, jerk!
You played better than I expected.
Well, of course I do. I'm a pro. Get out of here! I'm not telling you again, you jerk!
The small mistake can affect your entire game.
Stadler,
I'll show you.
show me what?
Is the pressure starting to get to you?
Hey Dave, I'm gonna grab some fast food. Do you want to come? Can you make it?
Oh my god, I'm starving. Yeah, I can do it.
You can count on me, because I know I can make it.